Good morning. I have a limited time to respond to the paper, and I understand there is going to be questions and answers session. So I will just go straight to the paper. I have written the response, so I will just read through my response. It's a privilege for me to review such a paper. So I am thankful to Jos management, the Dean's office, and also the author of the paper for engaging in such a field. Response to a paper presented at Jos Charles Frame Chapel. Title of the paper, The Biblical Concept of Justice and Mercy, an exegesis study of James chapter 2 verse 13, its ethical implication for the contemporary church in Nigeria. The author is Dr. Phineas Tom Kada. The reviewer is Yakubu Sawa Benzi, dated 9th October 2025. Commendation. The paper, The Biblical Concept of Justice and Mercy, an exegesis study of James chapter 2 verse 13, its ethical implication for the contemporary church in Nigeria, is an insightful and well-researched contribution to biblical and theological scholarship. The study commendably addresses a critical tension within Christian ethics, the balance between justice and mercy, through a sound exegetical analysis of James chapter 2 verse 13. The author's motivation arises from an observable challenge among Christian leaders in administering discipline and forgiveness within the faith community, making the work both contextually relevant and pastorally sensitive. By employing a contextual exegetical method, the paper explores the Hebrew and Greek foundations of justice, mishpat, and mercy, elios, situating them within their biblical and theological frameworks. The central thesis that divine justice and mercy are complementary expressions of God's righteous character reconciled in Christ's redemptive work is both doctrinally sound and ethically transformative. The study's guiding derived question is: how can the church dispense justice without undermining mercy, and extend mercy without compromising justice? It's thoughtfully examined and clearly answered. The findings are compelling. Justice without mercy degenerates into harsh legalism, while mercy without justice breeds permissiveness. The paper concludes that true Christian justice must be restorative and redemptive, emphasizing reconciliation and transformation over punishment. This paper deserves commendation for urging the contemporary church to re-evaluate disciplinary practices and embody God's character by integrating mercy into all expressions of justice, thus reflecting the triumph of mercy over judgment in the believer's life. My response. The paper did not expressly state the purpose or the thesis statement. Therefore, the reader is left with the option of determining the aim of the paper. The methodology, though not mentioned particularly in the paper, is identified as exegetical from the topic. The response is presented in thematic format in relation to major aspects in the paper. These are exegesis, theology, ethics, and context, engagement with secondary literature, coherence, organization, and style, originality, and scholarly contribution. Exegesis of James chapter 2 verse 13. Strength. Strong grasp of the historical and literary context of James, authorship date, audience, and Jewish background. The exposition of mercy triumphs over judgment is clearly and doctrinally sound. Excellent integration of related biblical passages, such as Matthew chapter 5 verse 7 and Romans chapter 8 verse 1. But this is the weakness. Limited grammatical and syntactical analysis of the Greek text. The exegesis leans more towards pastoral exposition than academic textual analysis. Theological integration. The strength. The paper demonstrates a coherent theological synthesis connecting divine justice and mercy at the cross. The discussion of penal substitution effectively explains how mercy operates through justice. The Christological focus is consistent with evangelical theology. But here is the weakness. Absence of engagement with alternative theological models, e.g. restorative moral influence or Christus Victor. It was mentioned during the presentation by the author, but not in the paper. Limited engagement of contemporary theological discourse on mercy and justice from global or African perspectives. Ethical and contextual application. The strength. The Nigerian contextual application is commendable, especially concerning church discipline, social justice, and pastoral care. The call for a rehabilitative rather than punitive approach reflects biblical ethics and pastoral sensitivity. The appeal for compassion and inclusion aligns with James' ethical emphasis. Weaknesses. Ethical analysis would benefit from a clearer structure distinguishing personal, ecclesial, and social ethics. The critique of Sharia justice requires caution and balance to avoid overgeneralization. That is found in page 20 of the paper. More engagement with empirical or sociological studies of the practices of the church in Nigeria would deepen the contextual grounding. Engagement with secondary literature. The strength. The bibliography includes reputable evangelical works, such as the Tyndale Bible Dictionary, Expositor's Commentary, and New Bible Dictionary. That is in page 23. The author shows familiarity with major reference tools and theological sources. Weakness. Most cited sources are dated 1980s to 2000s. Absent are recent scholarly publications post-2010. And African theological voices, for example, Biancato, John Mbiti, Kwame Bidiako. But the scope of the paper is Nigeria in Africa. The author mentioned during the presentation that the scope extends from Nigeria to the rest of Africa, but did not quote reasonable African theological authors. So secondary sources are often used descriptively rather than analytically. For example, you'll find it in page 13. And now coherence, organization, and style. The strength. Logical progression was very clear in the paper, from concept to exegesis to theology to ethics and to conclusion. Clear transitions between sections and accessible pastoral tone in the paper. That is clear. But here's the weakness. Originality and scholarly contribution. The paper offers a pastoral theological reflection on justice and mercy, contextualized for the Nigerian church, a perspective often underrepresented in theological literature. While it does not introduce new exegetical findings, it contributes a practical theological synthesis useful for pastoral ethics and church leadership formation. A well-researched theological, consistent, and contextually relevant paper with commendable pastoral insight, engagement with recent literature. My recommendation. 1. Add a methodological paragraph explaining the method of exegetical analysis adopted in terms of textual, linguistic, contextual, theological, and applicational stages. Clarify and strengthen the thesis into a concise argumentative statement, generally in the paper. State and follow an explicit exegetical method, historical, grammatical, or literary. Expand the Greek word and syntax analysis in James chapter 2, verse 13. Update the bibliography with recent post-2015 and African sources. Maintain academic tone and avoid sermonic transitions. Distinguish exegesis, theology, and application structurally within the paper. I recommend splitting the topic into exegetical, ethical, and hermeneutical sections. The topic should read a biblical concept of justice and mercy and exegesis of James chapter 2, verse 13. And a second topic could read thus: a theological concept of justice and mercy and its ethical implication for contemporary church in Nigeria. Or a hermeneutical analysis of the concept of justice and mercy and its ethical implication for the church in Nigeria. The biblical concept of justice and mercy in page 13 should be matched with the biblical concept of mercy in page 6 and the biblical concept of justice in page 4. There is a need to develop an abstract for the paper. Conclusion. This paper presents a thoughtful and pastoral rich exploration of the biblical harmony between justice and mercy. It succeeds in showing that mercy does not negate justice, but fulfills it in Christ. While the work demonstrates theological maturity and contextual awareness, it would reach higher scholarly excellence with a clearer methodological framework, updated sources, and more rigorous textual analysis and proper segmentation of the paper. Thank you very much.